Hello, Gabriel here with another tier list. This time we're looking at the Awoken artifacts. Now, we've gone over the Hellhorn artifacts so far, and I'd mentioned that I really think the Hellhorn has a strong pool of artifacts, making you want to consider aiming your map toward artifacts a little more than usual. I would say the opposite is true of Awoken. I think Awoken has potentially the worst pool of artifacts in the game. It's a toss-up probably between it and maybe Umbra, but I think it has different reasons for being bad than Umbra does. Like, Umbras are technically good, it's just that they're so morsel-centric that in a build that, like, right now it's just not a good plan to, like, try to game plan into morsels, I feel, so they had just a lot of the artifacts end up not doing much for you. The Awoken ones are just, like, kind of largely underwhelming. But, you know, let's get through it here. So, still the clan is probably I still think Awoken is the best clan in the game, though. I used to think Hellhorn. After my recent win streak, I'm pretty set that Awoken is the best clan in the game. But, certainly not because of the artifacts. Let's get the first one out of the way, though. This is the only one I'm putting in S tier. It's Rootsplit Mask. This artifact is pretty god tier. This is one of those artifacts where you find it and a run that might have not won just got a way to win. This takes care of so much. So much. You know, usually you're setting up top and, you know, depending on your setup, you might just not always have enough to be able to kill the large tanks in this game, and especially the mini bosses. But boom, now you do. You know, you get a whole extra turn to kill those things, and it's a nice one to synergize with Awoken, since, you know, you have all these heals, so a lot of the time the fact that you're getting maybe a little bit more damage than usual since enemies are sitting around is usually something you can deal with. So really, it just really, really helps to preserve your pyre health and just to win, you know. Just simply put, even if it's just saving pyre health here and there, that allows you to maybe be more aggressive on the map with, like, trading pyre health for caverns and whatnot. Or just, you know, getting a big buffer of pyre health to, like, deal with potential leaks. You can still leak with Rootsplit Mask. You got a pretty sorry deck if you're leaking with Rootsplit Mask, but it happens. But the fact that you have it usually means that you'll win a run that you otherwise wouldn't win. And it's just never really bad. It's always good. It's one of those always takeable artifacts, and it usually does a lot for you. Sometimes you didn't need it, but I don't think you're sad that you took it. It's really hard unless you're really, really, really thinking hard during a run to really predict what's going to get you. Often I find those mini bosses can get you by surprise, because you can stomp a run. There's nothing in the run prior to Divinity that really requires what those mini bosses require, right? Like the level of damage that you need to kill them, especially at high shard counts, is pretty high. Which Awoken often doesn't have. Awoken's pretty sort of just solid, but they don't have, you know, depending on your secondary clan, it's not something like Hellhorn where you can get these ridiculously high scaling damages a lot of the time. So, something like that to help with the mini bosses certainly helps. Now we're going to move on to the A tier. I debated maybe putting Thornfruit into the S tier, but I think I settle at the A tier because it is one that I think often most of the artifacts, when I think of all the clans and what I consider S tier artifacts, I'll usually pick those over Thornfruit, if they're side by side. Thornfruit's another one like Rootsplit Mask that's just very takeable, but I don't think that the impact is quite as high. It's still like a pseudo draw upgrade past turn 1 though, right? It does suck sometimes though, especially with like Wormkin, to have those stings be cycling back into the deck. That can be a downside, but it's at its best when you're Stygian and you have an incant deck. It's a free extra incant, you know, per turn, along with free extra draw. For Stygian, I would say it's definitely an S tier artifact, and it's something I'm really looking to add. But outside of Stygian, all it really represents is a little bit of extra damage and a pseudo draw upgrade. It's also a very nice counter to Seraph the Diligent. So all of those things considered, I give it like A+ tier, but probably not S tier. Very good artifact though. Closely behind it is a very similar artifact. Counters Diligent just the same, though it doesn't give you the draw benefit, which is why I think I prefer Thornfruit. However, the utility of Cursed Vines is very good. It's just very, very versatile in what you can use it for. You can break a backliner's spell shield. You can just bring them forward just to like kill them with a sting or something, or just kill them like bring a spike channeler to the front so that your sweeper doesn't take the whole spike's damage. If you didn't know that interaction, now you do. You can move your own units around, shuffle them around so that the front, if the frontliner's about to die, bring a new frontliner forward. Just very, very, very useful. I often find this does a lot of work when I add it, and it's very rarely not doing anything for me. Sometimes it does turn out that it doesn't do much, but most of the time it's just kind of, I end up very impressed with it. Very, very good rework. The devs have made a lot of great changes over the last year or so that Monster Train has been released. And this is definitely one of them, because this artifact used to be awful. This was a D tier artifact before. It was actively bad for your deck. So all it used to do is like shuffle the units around randomly. And inconsistent at that. So it was pretty bad before, but now it's great. Next one I got here is the Emblem of the Exiles. Hard to really put it in the S tier, because I feel like the ceiling isn't necessarily there, but it's just a very, very solid artifact. Every one of these 4 artifacts that have been listed so far are just super takeable. It's hard to just straight up skip these because there's really not much downside to them. It's all upside. And they're all just very passive in what they do. They just kind of do things. You don't have to invest anything to make them do what they do and do it well. Multi-floor setups will get more benefit out of Emblem of the Exiles. But even if it's just one floor it's hitting, it's still pretty good. That's, if you think about it, that's every 2 turns you're getting a Cycle of Life, Echo Infusion worth of health for free. It's pretty nice. And it's also one of those that's particularly better early game, I think, even though early game doesn't last as long. The health that you get from it in comparison to what the scaling of that point in the game has is really nice. 5 HP a turn. It's one of those that just is good at all stages of the game. I mean, honestly, all of these are. And then the final one in the A tier, I'm going to give it like an A-. We'll say A+, A- for these 4. Sap Tap. Sap Tap is less, I'd say it's less of a always take than these other 4, but it's still pretty takeable. It does suck when you have something like Cheater's Hand. They kind of nullify each other. So that's that is some downside of it, but, generally it just represents a draw upgrade. And not only that, but you can do fancy things with it. If you know, sometimes it can be okay with Cheater's Hand, like it might be that you want to like draw it after something, but usually for the most part it's just a free draw upgrade. There's not really that much special to it. If you have any amount of consistent heals, which you often do in Awoken, you're just going to be able to draw. Hopefully you can draw first. Sometimes you can't. It can screw you. Sometimes you just draw like a key card that was expensive that you really needed to be able to play, and then it just draws it and it screws over your game plan. But that's more of a play style thing. I'm really bad at that personally. I think these type of artifacts can probably, if you're really, really careful with them, they can be really good. But if you're reckless with them, they're not nearly as good. But, yeah, it's just a draw upgrade. There's not a whole lot to say about it. There's a little bit of shenanigans you can do with it, but usually it just rounds down to being a draw upgrade. Then we get to the B tier. We can just put these 2 right next to each other because they're so similar. But, I think prior to the DLC, I don't know why I can't remember Thorn casing or whatever this is. The one that adds piercing and 10 damage to stings, the one on the right here. That one was better pre-DLC, because basically everything that had armor in the game had like 20 or less health. So this would always kill them. It'd kill those armored up frontliners. However, in the DLC, that's never true anymore. So I think it's, worse definitely than Channelheart. There's a few reasons I think it's worse than Channelheart. A, it just does less damage, right? Channelheart gives 20, whereas the one that I cannot remember the name of, it'll be on the screen there. The piercing one only gives 10 damage. And I find that the piercing is almost always a downside now in the DLC, at least come late game. It has a definite advantage early game. Early game, the piercing is still relevant. You'll still kill tanks because they have 20 or less health, but there does come quickly a point, maybe like ring 4 and beyond or so, if you've taken any amount of shards. The tanks just have like anywhere from 60 to over 100 health on top of their armor. So you're just never going to kill them with piercing unless you have some gigantic hand of stings. And then at that point, the piercing, there's no real benefit to it, and it even has a downside because sometimes you want to like break a spell shield or break a damage shield, which now you can't do if you have this. And there's a significant amount of times I feel you want to do that. I'd say almost every time I take this artifact, there at least comes one moment, maybe 1 to 5 moments in a run where I wish it was not piercing. So I damn near even put it to C tier, but I didn't feel it was like significantly worse than Channelheart enough to do that. They're situational, of course. If you don't have stings, just don't take them. They're not like takeable, right? But if you do have stings, they're going to provide pretty decent value. And I don't have anything in the C tier. I could argue these are C tier as well. I kept them in B for now because, I don't know, I feel like you often do have stings, and when you do, they're just really good. But I didn't put anything in the C tier because these 4 I feel just are really bad. Let's start with the one that I think has the most potential to actually be good, which is Petrified Crucible. You're almost never going to add this because you're almost never running spikes, but when you do, it is good for that. It just adds an extra damage per spike, so literally doubles the damage. But how often are you running spikes? I've had my Shadow Gorder infusions into Thorn Hollow runs, and that's about it. That's the only way I think you can realistically make Thorn Hollow work with consistency, is that specific infusion, which is only going to come up every so often. There's a lot of moving parts to make that happen. And the other situation would probably just be Little Icarus, though I find it's kind of unnecessary with Icarus, but it's you're happy to have it with Icarus. And that's really it. I mean, Wrathful, I still maintain that Wrathful Prince spikes just doesn't work anymore. Once in a blue moon, maybe you could get it to work, but with consistency, I just don't think it's there, and I don't think this artifact even gives you enough to make it consistent. Beyond just, it might give you enough to actually have enough spikes to kill, but you still have the problem of he's not gaining enough armor. So, I think you just really, very, very often, this is just not going to do anything for you. So, I not like a good 99% of the time, maybe 95%, which makes it a D tier artifact. The next one is a very similar one, except, I don't know, Bloating Fungus. I've gone back and forth on this one. I really have settled that I think it's pretty crap. Like, regen is still like, it has its uses in the DLC, but as an actual heal effect, I don't feel it often is what its actual use is anymore. Like, to me, it's just a stacked set of cultivates, which can persist into Relentless Round, or also just sort of give you free cultivates every turn, and this doesn't help with that at all. All this does is just makes the actual heal effect from the regen better, which I think 95% of the time is irrelevant. You know, you're hard pressed to outpace the damage that these bosses output now. Your best bet is just to use heals and health increases, other forms of defense. Bloating Fungus does open up regen as a potential way to do that, though. There's such a chicken egg scenario there, though. It's like you would have had to really found this early and had, you know, usually when you find it early, you don't have your regen yet, so it's a speculative pick. And usually there's just better artifacts you could pick. Conversely, if you find it after, you know, rings 1 through 2 are really when you know if regen's a thing or not, because Wildwood Sap is like the main way to get regen, in my opinion. So if you didn't take it and you see it come up, you're just not going to take it. So, I don't know. I just find so often you're not using Bloating Fungus. And the next one we got here is Priory's Cloak. It's just, it's so meh. Like, maybe every now and then you can have a build where you're not quick and you have a huge health hollow or something or sentient in front, and then you're getting like a Unleash the Wildwood every turn. Even then, that's the ceiling of it, right? Even then, it's just a one-time maybe 100 to maybe 150 damage at best. I mean, how much damage can income every turn, right? You're just not looking at much damage. I mean, yeah, if you're doing 100 to 150 damage with it each turn, it's probably maybe a pretty decent artifact, but often that's just not the case. Most of the time, it's like 10 to 20 to 30 damage here and there. It's pretty poopy. And often I'd say most of the time it just doesn't do any damage at all. Because a lot of times you're just quick, you know, actually taking damage a lot of the time. I really don't think Priory's Cloak is good at all. It needs to do like X3. It needs to do like the Restoration Detonation worth of damage to make it worth it. And then Gnarled Root I have at the very bottom. As bad as Petrified Crucible is, I think this is even worse. It's like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, anything you would put spikes on would be a frontline tank. So why would you add attack damage to them? And it's not even that much. It's pretty bad. Every now and then, once in a blue moon, I've taken it and had it be mildly good, but that's like the ceiling. The ceiling is that it's mildly good. And most of the time, it's absolutely useless. Absolutely. Sometimes I've taken it thinking like, well, if I have to take Sharpen, it makes it into a bad Razor Sharp Edge. Keep in mind, it's still worse than Razor Sharp Edge, even with this artifact. It's still a 2 cost that doesn't even give as much attack as Razor Sharp Edge. And I'm always disappointed when I do that. Because it's still just so freaking underwhelming. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's one of the worst artifacts in the game, in my opinion. I mean, honestly, all 4 of them are. But that's going to do it for this one. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts, any surprises. Did you have any massive disagreements? Or did you feel like I was preaching to the choir here? Let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.